Hello, I'm Brad.
And I'm Jason.
You are listening to
Dice in Mind.
If our 5 listeners only knew what we talked about before we hit the record button,
Then we would have no listeners.
and we would probably have a podcast that would be permanently listed as explicit. But that shall remain a mystery. I have to say that I didn't prep you for this before we hit record, but I'm a little bit irritated with you.
It only took 30 years. Let's go.
Oh no. I'm a little irritated with you today. So it only took 18 hours today to get there.
Yeah.
You need to stop sending me book recommendations. Because every book you recommend.
Oh my God, you didn't. You didn't actually buy anything from the last one I sent you, did you?
No.
Okay.
No. I joke in saying that because, in all seriousness, you are very discerning when it comes to what you read, and you know what my likes and dislikes are. So if you recommend me a book, traditionally 99% of the time it's something that I will read and go, oh, that was a good read. You're not gonna, and what I mean by that is it's stuff within your professional, you never recommend that kind of stuff.
Boring.
But if it comes to sci-fi, and there are sci-fi books you've read where you're like, nah, that's not really my thing. You know, you've tried it, you don't recommend it.
Yep.
But one of the books a while back that you had talked about that you had wanted to read was a book called The Possibility of Life.
Yes.
Science, Imagination, and Our Quest for Kinship in the Cosmos.
Yes.
And this is by Jaime Green.
Yep.
And we were lucky enough to reach out, or we reached out with a slim hope that maybe she'd want to join us.
Yeah.
Not only did she agree to do that, but
this is great.
We got
advanced reader copies.
Yeah. You know,
that was just Jamie and her publicist, they were just nice as could be. And yes, I have right in front of me right here my copy. They sent us each a copy. And you're right, I had said to you, man, I mean, as soon as this book was announced, I had said, man, this looks right up my alley. I so want to read this. And we're just going to have to wait for months and months. And
it goes in line with some of the stuff you and I have wanted to do from a gaming perspective and everything. So it was almost like, I remember I had the word in my head. Kismet. Yes. That this book showed up on your radar at the time we were talking about writing and putting together some gaming stuff around this idea that there might be, and let's just, statistically or mathematically speaking, it just seems silly to me to believe that there can't be, life elsewhere. And even as someone who of faith, I don't think there's anything that precludes me from believing.
No, these are not mutually exclusive ideas.
No, and it's unfortunate. I don't want to get into politics, but for some they are. I don't believe that to be the case.
No.
And when you sent me,
I think I sent you the link, right? Like for the pre-order kind of stuff.
Yeah, and I was just fascinated. And then you did the reach out, and I think when she messaged us back asking for addresses to send us the copy, I joke, but we were kind of giddy about it.
Oh, no question about it. I mean, not that we've ever been like that before because of something with the podcast, but or Star Trek or Star Wars or D&D. Anyways, my point being, I think that's right. I mean, we got such a warm response from Jamie, and just to put a few things in perspective for our listeners, for this episode. So, first of all, this book has been available for pre-order for a while. It got on my radar, on our radars, I think it
I'll be honest.
Okay.
It hit your radar first. You're the one that directed me to it.
Yeah,
So,
well, because it came up on one of my feeds or in one of my magazines or something. Yeah, and so that was, I think, back as far as like maybe December, certainly January. And I say that because looking at my copy, I started reading it basically the day it arrived, which was on February 15.
Yep.
This episode drops on April 17. And good people who are listening right now, tomorrow Jamie's book releases and is available to everyone, not just on pre-order.
Yeah.
And so we were just really fortunate to chat with Jamie, who, as we'll hear shortly, is just the loveliest person, a wonderful, engaging writer, and the depth of her geekiness goes far. She definitely was a kindred spirit. But to go back to what you were saying, Brad, because I didn't mean to waylay this. Your observation a few minutes ago about just your assumption. Belief is a strong word, although it is my belief. But your belief, your assumption, your expectation that the galaxy, the universe, must be teeming with life. Who knows what percentage, who knows how much of that is sentient, who knows how much of that is sentient and self-aware, whatever the odds are, whatever the percentages are. We've, I think, always both believed that there can't be any other way, right? Goes back to the sentiment, I think, so beautifully expressed in the movie and the book, but especially the movie, Contact. Right, Contact, which remains my all-time favorite movie. And so just the fact, and we'll talk about this, but just the fact that those sentiments are in the book, it just resonated with us.
Yeah, and I think you made and then we'll jump to the interview, but you said something that I think people need to understand, and that is, we don't know if, sentient life out there is like the non-talking aliens in Independence Day, or what, in some circles they call the Greys, or if it's amoeba. We don't know.
Right.
But just people assume there can't be life. Well, what we're talking about could be in some various form of life. It could be, we've already got potential evidence of it on other planets and moons in our own solar system.
At least possibilities.
Yeah, there's possibilities of
at
it,
least possibility. Yep.
And so if that's the case, then the possibility has to exist somewhere else.
Yeah.
So and Contact, what's funny, before we jump over, I don't want to waylay it either. I found it interesting. I don't necessarily know, and if I read correctly, it really wasn't Carl Sagan's intent. But when you watch the end of Contact, Matthew McConaughey's character, Porter Joss.
Yeah, just a brilliant scene.
Yeah, and Jodie Foster's Ellie, I can't remember her last.
Ellie Arroway.
Thank you. They have that conversation. And I think in that very moment, it's very poignant that I think it gives a very logical explanation on how you can believe and believe. Yeah,
he says, and I can't quote it directly at the moment, but he says, when questioned, do you believe her? And he says something to the effect of, Dr. Arroway and I come from very different backgrounds. We have very different training and very different perspectives. But I, for one, believe her.
Yeah.
And it's just a wonderful movie. Look, I think we should just get into it, because as good as this might be, let's go, because
I think the interview is fantastic.
Jamie just brought so much to the table in and beyond the book. So we are really thrilled to bring you our chat with Jaime Green. Jaime Green is a science writer, essayist, editor, and teacher, and she is series editor of the Best American Science and Nature Writing. She received her MFA in Creative Nonfiction from Columbia, and her writing has appeared in Slate, Popular Science, New York Times Book Review, American Theater, Catapult, Astrobites, and elsewhere. She lives in Connecticut with her husband and son. All right, well, We are thrilled to be sitting here across the digital ether with Jaime Green. I'm holding in my hand The Possibility of Life, Science, Imagination, and Our Quest for Kinship in the Cosmos. Jaime, thank you for joining us. It's so cool to have you here.
Of course. Thanks so much for inviting me.
There's so much we could ask you and talk about. We've already been talking a little offline, obviously, and there's just so much we can geek out about. But here's actually, if you don't mind, where I want to start with the question. So, this is a book literally about the possibility of life in the galaxy, in the universe, whatever. But right before we hit record, you said you started out in theater.
Yes.
In college. Yeah. And I know you've got an MFA in creative nonfiction. So I mean, I see the links, but how does a person go from theater to becoming like just a foremost science writer? That's not a natural progression for most people.
Well, it happened because my whole life it's been theater and acting. Like when I was for as long as I can remember, I wanted to be a writer and I wanted to act. Like those were the two things I loved. Those were the two things I did, through school. And when I was in college, I was a theater major, but I was really lucky that I went to a school at the time, at least, where anyone could do a creative writing honors project, even if you weren't an English major.
Oh, cool.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and those weren't too disparate. I was doing theater and creative writing. I took a playwriting class. And so I did, in undergrad, I did a creative writing thesis in fiction. And so it was always theater and writing. And when I was graduating, I applied for a bunch of jobs in publishing. I applied for a bunch of jobs in the theater industry in New York. I happened to get a job at a talent agency. And so I worked in theater for a few years, first at a talent agency, then in new play development. And then the 2018 recession hit, or 2008 recession hit. I'm not that young. And, I got a job as a receptionist, which paid better than my theater job. Oh my God. And I had been doing like some theater blogging on the clock at my theater job, so maybe it was fine that they didn't pay me very well. And so I was like, well, theater didn't work out. And I was also like kind of burnt out and soured on the industry. And I was like, well, now let's try writing. And I like I would go to a cafe and like open my computer and expect to just start writing a novel.
Not cliche at all.
No, and it just surprisingly didn't immediately happen. And so I was thinking about like, what did I really love writing in college? And I thought back to the one creative nonfiction class that I'd taken, which was the one creative nonfiction class at the time that was offered. It was literally, you could take, there's one class. And then I just sort of, without really thinking about it, ended up in an MFA program. I was like, well, I'll go to the info session and see what's up. And then I was like, oh no, I really liked that. Oh, cool. Well, I'll just send in an application and see what happens. And then I got in. And the way that brought me to science writing, because I had also always loved science growing up. I didn't really know what a career in science meant. I didn't know anything about research or how any of that works. But I had always liked science, and I had this idea that I would go to college and double major in theater and physics, partly because I liked physics and partly because I thought it sounded really cool to major in those two things, like how interesting. But then senior year of high school, I didn't do enough of my calculus homework to really keep up with it. And then I was like, oh no, can't really do physics without that. And so then I got to grad school, and that first semester, one of my professors mentioned that there was a science writing group on campus that was actually run through like the either the bio or the neuroscience department. And I was like, oh, I've always loved science.
Really cool.
I'll go to that. And I from then on just started looking for opportunities to incorporate science into my creative nonfiction. I also didn't know that science journalism programs existed. If I had known about that, things could have ended up very differently.
Because I mean, that's really interesting. I mean, because your book, because like I was thinking about science journalism, right? And your book has not a lot, but a bit of a different vibe to me, right? One, I think it's funny.
Thank you.
And like I appreciated the seemingly random little bits of humor when you weren't expecting them. It's I think that's important. I mean, I like having humor in science writing. One of my favorite scientist authors is Robert Sapolsky, right? The neuroscientist, neuroethologist, and the man is hilarious in his writing, even though he's at the top of his game scientifically, and that's hard to find. You've got humor, and I don't know how else to better put this. It's like the reader's there with you. It's not the right word. It's a very personal book. Like, there doesn't feel like there are any airs or pretenses. There's not a distance. It's like you're clearly enamored with this stuff, and it translates and it carries the reader along. I mean, obviously, like Brad and I are biased because, like, yeah, we're there, right? We love this stuff anyways. But that's very cool. That's an interesting background. What a neat way to do it. So, if I may, let me just read something.
Oh gosh,
it's just a sentence. Well, I will preface by saying that I just loved that the book within, what is it, the first 30-ish pages. I mean, basically through the preface just into the first chapter, or the intro into the first chapter, you ground the book, you ground the argument for the book in both Star Trek and Carl Sagan. And it's like, oh man, I mean, I'll be honest, I had a bit of a moment when I was reading those first pages, because it's like, this is our generation. I don't know how else to put it. It's like, this was the hope. This was the notion that we surely must be living in the galaxy, teeming with life, and maybe even replete with sentient life. And one hopes they're doing a lot better with it than we are. And it's just a matter now until we encounter it. And just this one sentence, I think it sums up the whole book. Through fiction, we can move beyond likelihoods and binary outcomes to look instead at what our imaginations do with the limitless possibilities of outer space, and crucially ask what that might mean. I mean, come on, you're even blushing. Mic drop. Be honest.
Jason texted me very late at night.
I sent you a picture of the page, I think.
Yeah, and even though I had the book, he was very.
No, I dug in as soon as it got here.
Yeah. So he had beat me to start it. And you were already enamored once you read that, and then you actually, like you said, you took a picture of that portion of the page. So.
But sorry, I just wondered if you wanted to comment on. Sorry, we just read from your book.
No,
we should let you talk.
No, this is wonderful. You write a book, and like, this is the dream, that people get it and connect with it in that way. I don't really know what. Can you ask me a question?
Oh man, can we? Okay, so okay, how about this? Because I mean, I kind of get the vibe, but like, why Sagan?
I mean, he's everything. Like, so I think I'm a few years younger than you guys, and so Sagan.
I don't know about you, but I'm 31. So.
Okay, so I am older than you.
Okay,
I'm much older than you.
Brad's just lived in a remarkably difficult life for 31 years.
I'm kidding.
So yeah,
I'm closer to AARP age.
Right.
So. We definitely have a few years on you.
Yeah. So Sagan, Cosmos, the original Cosmos was airing before I was born, I believe.
Oh, that hurt a little, but go on.
Okay, but just barely. Right? Like, it was like 1980-ish.
Was it really?
Yeah.
So we were 6, and I first saw it when I was like in 6th-ish grade.
Okay, right. Okay. So now we've established the age difference. So I grew up on Star Trek, on Next Generation. My guess is around when I was 8 or so, my dad started putting it on because he had grown up on original series, and it was just like, here's some TV. And I don't think he set out to indoctrinate me. I actually asked him about it recently because I've never asked him, like, why did you put on Star Trek for me and for my little sister, who would have been like 5 at the time. And it's not like it's inappropriate, but I don't know that she got anything out of it. Because I always wondered if he thought that, like, aha, this is something for Jamie, or if he was just like, oh, here's some TV. And I think it was the latter. But it ended up becoming like pretty central to our relationship, you know. So my parents were divorced by that point, and I don't know when Star Trek aired, but I'm pretty sure it was the weekends, and we would watch it at my dad's house. And when I got older, and either like the visitation schedule changed or the TV schedule changed, we would watch it. I would be at my mom's house and he would be home, and we would both be watching it, you know, live on TV, as you did back then. And every commercial break, I would run from the living room into the kitchen where the phone was, and the phone would ring, and it would be my dad, and we would talk about what had just happened, and then it'd be like, okay, it's coming back, I'll talk to you next commercial break, and hang up and run back in to watch the show. It was just like really very, you know, foundational in that way. For Sagan, I don't remember when I first like learned who Carl Sagan was, but I vividly remember the first time that I read him. When I was a teenager, I worked at the local Barnes and Noble, and they had a policy where any book that they had more than 1 or 2 copies of, you could borrow one, because they wanted you to be well read and know about the books. And so I borrowed the copy of Cosmos, and I borrowed Contact, and I read those both while I was working there. And, you know, so I was like 16 or 17, and it was just like, yeah, because like I already, you know, was interested in sci-fi and in science. And, you know, it was just like, of course, because it was, and I guess the movie, I must have seen the movie of Contact before I read the book.
Yeah, ditto.
Yeah. And it was just, you know, he was a beautiful writer and brought so many big picture things together. I learned so much science from reading Cosmos. Like, I just learned a lot. And yeah, it was very exciting, and just made it feel, like you said, like the universe must be full of life just waiting for us.
Have you read or listened to interviews with Anne Druyan?
Yes. Well, remember, I interviewed her for the book, and so that was
right.
That was so meaningful to me. So I first learned about her from the Radiolab episode about the creation of the Golden Record. It's this amazing segment. It's on 2 different episodes of Radiolab. It's on the love episode, and I believe it's the space episode, which is so perfect. And so she talks about the creation of the Golden Record and how they fell in love during that process. And getting to interview her for the book was hugely meaningful to me, because, you know, I knew that she was the co-producer and co-creator of Cosmos, that she, you know, gets a story credit on Contact, but what I learned talking to her was that she's the uncredited co-author, because she had been a novelist, but as she told me, and as I write in the book, you know, the editor told her, we're not going to put your name on this. No one wants a book by Carl Sagan and his wife. But she's remarkable, you know, on her own, and as a collaborator, and just getting to talk to her about Contact and about the Golden Record, and it was very meaningful. And, you know, obviously there's like this kind of empty space in the book where, if he were still alive, hopefully, if I were lucky, interviews with Carl Sagan would go, because he died you know, so prematurely. But his presence is throughout the book. He definitely shows up in more chapters than any, you know, most scientists and writers who I read or interview show up in 1, maybe 2 chapters, but he's throughout it, because it really is part of his legacy, I think. I was impressed with the range of people, especially scientists, you interviewed for the book, right? I mean, there are, in any of these science books, you often, you know,
I mean, we all know them in whatever field. There are scientists who are very prominent, who speak very well, almost invariably to a T these days. Probably are dressing all in black for interviews. I mean, there's definitely a thing, and they're good and they have something to say. But there were a lot of people in your book you had interviewed who I had not heard of before, and who were doing the work. I just thought that was very cool. That was a much wider, more interesting net than I would have expected.
Oh, I really appreciate that, because it was hard because the book covers so many different fields of science.
Yeah.
And so I wasn't able in the research to go really deep. I wasn't able to interview 10 people who study a given thing and then figure out who, the most interesting characters are and who has the most interesting research. Like, it was really just like, I got a few names, and a lot of it was luck of the draw of like who emailed me back. And I just felt very lucky that I ended up finding a lot of people who speak really interestingly and are doing really interesting work.
As an aside, I don't know why, I enjoyed that you used your own drawings. I don't think you're going to win awards for them.
Oh, really? Really? You think that drawing of the
Wow.
little monkey creature from Avatar is not?
I didn't say it. I'm just saying. I mean,
It's so
they
bad.
all conveyed exactly what you were talking about. That impressed me. But I mean it. I don't
Jace,
know that.
you were really complimentary at the start with the mic drop moment. Now you're giving a reason to hang up on us.
Yeah,
No, it amuses me to no end, because I got the idea to include a couple little sketches, because at some point I was explaining something or figuring out how to write about something, and I drew a little sketch, and I was like, oh, that's kind of cute. Maybe I'll see if I can put that in there. But and it does. I hope that it gives that feeling like you were describing, of that I'm like with the read. I'm there with the reader.
It does.
I'm like, I wanted it to feel like I'm telling you about this, and we're like at a bar, and I just grab a napkin to sketch a little something to explain it. But that drawing of the Avatar monkey, I really thought at some point someone would say, "Hey, maybe not this one," and no one did. It just like really tickles me that. But it's like, it's a hard creature to explain in words because of the way that it's like sort of has two arms but sort of doesn't. And I was like, well, I'm not gonna like try to get an image credit from Avatar. They're not gonna let me use that.
Yeah.
So I drew it, and it's like, well, I never said I was an artist. Did not go to school for visual art, as everyone can tell.
Let me ask, because I'm usually the type that does the weird segues and right turns, but with your experience writing this, has it given you like the fuel to maybe continue and write further? Do you have ideas of what you might? And again, we're not looking for spoilers, just in general sake,
Yeah, it really did. I'm working on an article right now that comes out of what I write about in the first chapter about the study of the origin of life, because that's like half a chapter, and I just felt like I could write so much more about it. Like, I wanted to learn so much more about it. So I'm working on an article now about some of the researchers who I write about in the book, just because I was like, I want to learn and write more about what you're doing. I feel like this was the end of about 10 years on and off writing about astronomy, astrobiology, exoplanets, SETI. I feel like I've probably mostly said what I need to say about that. But there's also a lot that I write about in the book that was really new to me. A lot of the cell biology and evolution and origin of life stuff. And I feel really excited to keep learning and writing about some of that.
That's really cool.
How does, and we'll obviously come back to the book, but we talked a little bit before, and we know you're a gamer.
Yes.
How does, your interest in this and writing in the book, how long, and obviously as a theater major, that probably plays out in some way into your gaming.
Yeah.
How has, this love of science and science journalism and so it kind of bled over into gaming, if anything at all?
I don't know that it has. I think that my theater background comes out a lot more. Because I don't write fiction. I know I said I wrote fiction in undergrad, but I was very bad at it. I was very bad at like characters and making things happen to them, which is why I like writing nonfiction, because the stuff is out there and I just put it in a cool shape. And it's more idea driven and less story driven, which I think, Jason, is like one of the reasons why this book doesn't feel like traditional science journalism to you, is like the scientists are not really characters. Part of that is because I wrote this almost entirely during the pandemic. So almost all of my research was conducted over Zoom.
Wow.
There was no going to someone's lab and spending a day with them and telling you, they wear Hawaiian shirts or whatever. But in terms of gaming, so I've played 2 long-term D&D campaigns now, or I'm in my second one, which is going on 3 years. And I feel bad because, so I wrote the acknowledgments to my book, which are not in the like early copies you guys have, but I wrote those, I don't know, 8 months ago. And I thank my D&D crew, and I say something like, I sure fucking hope, we've beaten I sure fucking hope our game's over by now. Cause it was just like, it felt like we were so close to the end and I was so excited. And now I'm really worried that they're going to think that I was like, oh, I hope I'm done with you. But I just like, I meant like, I sure hope we won, but we are still going. But it also, like, we don't play as regularly as we did when everyone was still in lockdown. We had a really consistent first year and a half. But yeah, I think being a theater, like playing D&D feels like improv to me. I love battle. Like I'm playing like an arcane trickster rogue right now, and so I love that she can like cast spells or shoot her bow. Like I love the strategic choices of that, but I also really love the like in character role playing that really feels like acting, like connecting to a character, figuring out what she would do, what she would say. I love, playing out scenes in first person rather than like, well, she says blah blah blah. Like I'm just like, this is Angelina talking now, and then I say something, but I have to differentiate that because I tend to play characters who are very similar to me in motivation, in values, because that's just like easier to play.
I'm insulting you through the voice of my character, not because I think they're right.
Right. Yeah. Whereas like one of the other players plays a very stupid character, which he did so that he would like totally dense, hyper literal, which he did to force himself like far away from himself, so that like he might understand something, but his character does not.
Are others at the table also theater geeks? Like, is that just kind of the bar?
I don't think anyone else has I went to college with one of the players, and the other 2 are like longtime best friends. I don't think anyone else acted, but so when aside from acting in college, I did a lot of production management. My friend who plays the very stupid character was a stage manager. Our DM was a tech director, and the other player I think does like tech director, lighting design stuff. So it's like we are all theater people, but not. I'm probably the one who's the most of a performer.
Okay.
And you actually see it in how they play. So like I'm improvising sort of in character, connecting to her emotions. Like I definitely have cried during a game. But also our DM loves, he's pulling those strings. And the player who is like a tech director, guy, he's very into like the rules and the strategy. He's definitely like way deeper into gaming than I am. And then my stage manager friend, he's doing the opposite of acting. He is acting, and he has a character voice, which no one else has. But so
how did you get into gaming? Obviously you had some people kind of pull you in.
Yeah, so I don't know if I was thinking about this, and I don't know if this is like looked down upon by serious gamers, but I listened to the Adventure Zone, and
sure.
Which I came into because I was listening to other McElroy podcasts. Like I So I was listening to their shows, and then they started a D&D real play podcast, and I started listening to it and loved it and completely fell in love with it. And so then my first like long-term game was actually DM'd by my husband, played with a couple of our friends who all listened to the podcast and were like, this is fun, let's play it. And I think a couple of them had played D&D before, but there were at least two of us who our only exposure to it was from the podcast. And, we were probably like in our late 20s when this happened, I think. Yeah.
I mean, I didn't encounter role playing until I was almost through high school.
Mm-hmm.
Brad, you had encountered it before that, and what you were encountered it first with D&D, did you not?
Yeah, when I was younger, we did some, but it was young people playing with young people. So I'd say D&D, but it was D&D light.
Yeah. So. And I was introduced to Star Wars, right? West End Star Wars, and so this does make the question: have you played Star Trek Adventures?
I haven't.
Oh, you gotta play.
Yeah, I have. Like the game we're in now is just like it's entirely written by my DM, but it's in just sort of like traditional. I don't know if we're like literally in Faerun, but it's like classic.
Yeah.
If you were to ever, I'm not saying you would, but if you were to ever DM or GM any game, any setting, what do you think you'd do?
Ooh,
sorry,
that's hard, and it feels hard for me because like I don't have a fiction writing mind, so I do think I like our DM, like he has binders and stories, and it's just like so rich and so like. And so I don't remember if I mentioned, but like he's married to one of my best friends from college, which is how I like heard that this game was happening early in the pandemic. And I was like, I would like to join it, please. And like forced my way in. But I've actually asked my friend, like, this game is so big and sprawling. I feel nervous that it's like, we don't know where it's going. She was like, no. Ben knows where it's going. I was like, okay, good. I can go with it now. But what would I do? I don't know.
That's a hard question.
It's really hard because it's just like, it's not how my brain works. I think I would like enjoy, I think I would probably, I don't know. DMing seems so hard to me. Even aside from like narratively, like writing all this stuff, just like holding all that information in your head and being ready for anything. I like being responsible for one character instead of an entire world.
That's fair.
And I was originally music performance and then ended up in business. So I have no theater. I have one theater credit, which was, and that's the only time I'll ever talk about it right now. And music, and it's still, it is a challenge because and Jason's been lucky enough or I've been lucky enough to have Jason as my guinea pig to try this DMGMing out. But you're right, it is a lot easier for me and like you to play a single character and be able to play them up. So
being mindful of your time and pivoting all the way back to the book.
That's okay.
Yeah,
and
sorry.
I'm happy to run late.
Oh,
I'm happy to keep chatting. So
thank you. No, that's wonderful. Thank you. One more thing I want to bring. Well, there's so many things, but just love this. You set out. And this is apropos because Brad's been putting on the spot with these questions that are difficult to answer, and I think there's value in that. Early on, you just state emphatically, "What if" is not an unscientific question, and I love that because that's, I mean, as you've probably encountered that with all the people you've talked to over the years, right? And interviewed. That's so orthogonal to the way that a lot of actual science is done right now, right? That it's hypothesis driven, and don't get me wrong. I mean, I'm all about an hypothesis and a good testable hypothesis, but that's not asking what if, right? What if isn't generating an hypothesis. What if isn't trying to figure out which journal is going to publish this puppy, right? What if is letting yourself wonder about the universe.
See, I actually, when I wrote that line, I think I was partly thinking about generating a hypothesis that, like, in order to, like, I think generating a hypothesis is a really imaginative act. So, like, one of the multitude of jobs and gigs that I have is I do some writing consulting work with grad students in the sciences applying for National Science Foundation fellowships.
Nice.
Wow.
So
Nice.
yeah. And one of the things about that, you have to write a research proposal, and the research proposal, they don't say this, but they tend to be successful if they're either hypothesis driven or objective driven. They don't like just sort of open-ended, I'm going to find out how many fish are in this pond, I'm going to characterize this thing. They want a prediction because they want, and the way I always put it to the students is, they want to see that you can do that creative predictive work, that you have a reason for, like, you have a reason for thinking, you know, I hypothesize that this is what we'll see and here's why. It shows a lot more critical thinking than just like, I'm curious what the answer is. And so while a hypothesis like narrows your work in a certain way, and you're not just like wandering around like gaping at the wonder of the universe, I do think that it is like I was directly thinking about hypotheses as imaginative work, because it's this prediction and it requires imagining what might happen. And I'm sure there's like, you know, there's a huge range. And sometimes a hypothesis is like, you basically know what's going to happen, but sometimes it's really going out on a limb. And like, I wonder if, and it's following an intuition, you know, which requires also that sort of imaginative connection to the work, you know, like I have a hunch that this is how this works, and let me see if I can find out.
I think that's lovely. Okay, so let me ask you to state, I really do. Let me ask you to state an hypothesis. Okay.
Oh boy.
So not officially, it doesn't have to be formal,
Okay.
but seriously, because you kind of come back and forth to it throughout the book. It's certainly there at the beginning, it's there at the end, and it's interesting how you reframe it by the end. But let's talk for a sec about the possibility of life in the universe.
Yeah.
Right, you know where I'm going with this.
Yeah.
You're very gentle with the Drake equation, right? Good, bad, and ugly. You're very kind to it, because that's not the point of the book. But what, we live in a galaxy that has maybe 400 billion stars. We now know that most planets, most stars, maybe nearly all of them, have planets, right? So it's no pun intended, it's an astronomical number, right? There are like 1,000 star systems just within like 25 cubic light years. I mean, it boggles the mind. And you get into some of this, there's obviously no possible way yet to like figure out a real answer, but I'm curious what you think, like as you were writing and as over the years, like when you think about the possibility of life, hypothetical, doesn't have to be valid, but what in your mind, right, creatively, like what's the zeitgeist when you look out to the stars? What are you seeing around that stuff?
I think it's likely that simple microbial life like bacteria is common. I think that sort of life as a chemical phenomenon is probably just about everywhere that it could be. And my evidence for supporting this hypothesis as like a reasonable one is that life on Earth got started just about as quickly as conditions allowed. Right. And so that suggests that it's probably pretty easy. As for anything more than that, anyone that we could talk to, that I feel less sure about, because first of all, because complex cells didn't show up for about 2 billion more years. So that to me says, you know, that they're not cheap, right? That it either takes a fluke or something, you know, you have to roll the dice a lot of times before that combination comes up. And I don't know, it's like the more I learn about life on Earth, and how interconnected everything is. Like I just finished reading this amazing book called Entangled Life by a British mycologist, Merlin Sheldrake. And so it's about fungi. And one of the things I learned that blew my mind is that So there were like photosynthetic algae were just, floating around, but plants were not able to exist on were not able to exist on land without going into symbiotic relationships with fungi. Like fungi on plant roots make it possible for them to exist on land. And so just like, what if fungi don't evolve on another planet? You don't get trees. Like, and land plants happened before land animals and are so foundational and intrinsic and like necessary to all land ecosystems on Earth. And it's just like, well, what if that didn't happen? So like the more I learn, the less sure I am. But the wonderful flip side of that is that the more I learn, the more I appreciate life on Earth and and maybe I don't there's so much wonder right here that does it for me. And also the more I learn about how hard it's going to be to detect life on another planet or confirm it, that like unless someone sends us a direct message like in Contact that's like, hey Earthlings, what's up, we're here, how are you, nice to meet you, we're just not gonna know. And so I'm not like pinning my hopes on any sort of aha moment because I don't think that's gonna happen.
Yeah, I was thinking about this issue just a day or two ago, and I think part of it was probably because I was thinking about our upcoming chat, but just in general, because I've been watching a lot of Star Trek lately, and I was thinking, the distances, like going to your point of how will we know, when will we know, right? Any of this, the distances are so vast between stars, and then I started thinking, okay, but up until a few centuries ago, several centuries ago, the distances between the East and West hemispheres were functionally the same, right? That there were peoples on Earth who had no comprehension that there could be anyone else. And that was just an ocean over. And so maybe, I mean, and again, maybe this is just me wanting to be optimistic, but
of course,
maybe that's where we are as a planetary species, right? We're in the 1200s, like this guy Da Gama, he's got this weird idea. I mean, it's hopefully the planetary version won't end in like the rape and pillage of entire peoples and planets, but still, like what if we're just clueless and there's that much of a paradigm shift again? I mean, who knows? It's the kind of stuff that comes up reading your book, which I think is just glorious.
Oh man, thank you.
Well, yeah, as we're reading, we're calculating our own what ifs based off of your writing, and I think that I think that's a positive thing. Obviously, because there's too much inward looking these days, and people aren't necessarily, not to get political, we don't do that, but I think if people had more wonder, who knows what would be we have differently around. So
have to ask an obligatory question as we close up here. Have you been watching Star Trek as of late?
I haven't.
Oh.
I haven't. I watched like the first season and a half of Discovery.
Oh.
And a couple episodes of Picard. But I know that I need to get on the new season of Picard. I've heard nothing but amazing things.
That's where I'm going.
And that you don't need to have watched the first two seasons. And it just, someone described it as Next Generation fanfic. And I'm like, yup, sign me up. Sign me up.
So I will say about my unsolicited opinion.
It's a gritty season 8. It's a much grittier season.
Interesting.
It's a grittier season 8, but what did I text you, Brad? Like 2 or 3 episodes in now as we're recording, it's like, Jamie, it's like TNG season 8, the movie.
Okay.
So it's amazing.
Because I'm saying that it's gritty is actually, I think my problem with like Discovery in the first season of Picard is I don't
like that.
Okay, because like I don't come to Star Trek for gritty. Like I grew up on Next Generation. I want like nice adventures.
I know what you mean, Brad, because it is grittier. It's more.
It's definitely visually gritty.
I overuse that. I overuse the term gritty. It's how like and I can't remember the episode name, and I should, the 2-part arc, the Locutus arc, in TNG.
Sure.
That how that was a different type of vibe.
Yes.
That's kind of the vibe you can get in watching parts of the episode, but seeing, without giving anything away, it's in a trailer. You can see Riker and Picard on the bridge together again. I mean,
Jamie, it is glorious. It is.
Yeah.
It's old and new, and oh my God, I'm just going to say one thing.
Okay.
Worf. That's all we're gonna say.
I've like picked up on this buzz.
Don't read anything.
I know. I'm not going to.
Don't you? It's worth. It'll do your soul good.
I'm excited. I have trouble watching TV shows during the basketball season because I watch basketball, and so they're like, there's always a game on. So it's always a little
college
tricky.
Or pro? Pro. What team?
Yeah. A few, which is why there's always a game on. So I follow the Nets and the Raptors. I really love the Raptors, and my husband follows them and the Timberwolves. So because he was born in Minnesota, and we used to live in Brooklyn, and then Raptors. I just fell in love with them after they won the championship in 2019. And I'm talking about sports on a D&D podcast. Like,
no, that's okay. I can relate to that. I can relate to that. Jason,
I know it's the one with the net, and I'm good. I mean,
Jason's the guy that if we made him paint a shirt like in Big Bang Theory, it would say "Go Sports" on it.
I have the shirt. My brother got it for me.
So I have the shirt too. I have a shirt that says I just hope both teams have fun or something like that. that I wear when the Nets play the Raptors, because those are both my teams. I'm like, I just want all my boys to have fun.
See, because I'm in Milwaukee. It's the Bucks and
lovely.
But we put the game, and my wife played high school and intramural and all that. She's taller. We have this running discussion. 1, Jordan's the GOAT, not LeBron. And 2, we can't watch the game because we watched it the other night and they had 17 in a row and they were going for 18. And as soon as we turned the game on, they were up by. Jason's looking. Jason, it's when every time they shoot the ball and it goes,
you get a point or two or three.
And the Bucks had hit a lot of nets, but then all of a sudden stopped hitting the nets. But the other team was hitting the nets, which means
making it much more confusing than just points.
I'm doing that on purpose because Jason's grin is getting bigger and bigger and bigger as we're talking, which tells me that I am in for a verbal lashing later.
I honestly, I stopped caring like 5 minutes ago, so keep going.
You're just sitting there thinking about Star Trek, like, Worf.
Look, you know what? If I had to root for a team, I'd root for the Niners.
Do you know what city they're in?
DS9.
Please,
people, please.
I thought you were going to go. Yeah. What is it? Worf?
Death to the opposition.
Death to the opposition.
I've used that when at sports games, except the only time I've ever been at sports games are when the girls were little and one of our daughters was like on a little soccer team, and it's I probably shouldn't be doing this.
No, absolutely not.
You can't yell "Death to the opposition" when kids are playing.
No.
Well, now that we've completely degenerated this podcast,
it was my fault.
No.
It was entirely my fault.
You have to understand if sports come up because I usually wear like hockey jerseys.
Yeah, you really do. Yeah.
And Jason makes fun of me, so this time I didn't. Anytime sports can come up in this podcast like this, I love to break out because I just love to see Jason's eyes kind of gloss over, and so I can because he'll razz me about because of his background, he'll razz me about some science every once in a while. So any chance I get,
look,
especially with someone who's a diehard fan,
I was once on an academic decathlon, so that's pretty sporty.
Oh yeah.
Well,
we'll talk about that later.
Right on. Yeah,
it's amazing we married. Wow, Jamie, thank you so much for spending time for just such a wonderful book. Selfishly, I hope you do something like this again.
I would love to. I fully intend to.
Yeah, it's wow. Yeah, thank you so much. Be well. We will definitely be following you online as we do and reading what you're writing and just helping, using your stuff to help us dream of what's next and what's out there.
Thank you so much. I've had so much fun talking to you guys. Thank you so much for having me.
GM Corner.
I'm like a little bit hyper focused these days on some stuff that's outside of normal like RPG reading. I've been really focused in on some of my music study stuff and some other reading that I've been working on that, outside the realm of this conversation. I won't bore people, but one thing that's been sitting on my my table by my chair, I don't know even what you call it. It's just my table. I call it my reading table.
Yeah.
Is the RuneQuest source book. Or RuneQuest starter's kit, because it has like a condensed rules guide. I reread first edition Fantasy Age.
Oh, nice.
In preparation, because I want to, when second edition comes out, I kind of want to see the differences in the formatting and how they put it all together. I'm really excited about that. And the other is well, you know what? That's enough for this week. I'm gonna go with that.
There's a lot. There's a lot on your table.
Yeah, there's and now that we talked about Crime and Punishment, I think that's going to have to go back, as I said to you just a little bit ago, off when the button wasn't recorded. Seriously. I might have to reread that at some point. So how about
That's
you?
Cool.
And I haven't gotten a text from you lately in terms of any like true book recommendations other than humorous stuff we send each other. So I'm curious what you're reading, because I may not fully know, and it may be stuff within your profession or whatnot.
Well, as you know, and wisely did not respond to any texts until I was on my way home, other than when I sent you that one from the university. I was in on a little weekend trip with my family doing some college touring stuff, and while in Milwaukee, we stopped at Boswell Books.
Yes.
And that was fun. It's a wonderful bookstore. Just like when I was at Harry Schwartz before that. It looks just the same, has the same vibe. It's great. And everyone in the family needed a book, and I was looking at their I think it was new and noteworthy section, and I had one in my hand that intrigued me, and then I looked down, and it was one of those oh moments.
Yeah, I was waiting to see if you would talk about it.
Yeah, and you just flashed the picture I sent. And so I picked up. It's a thin volume. I didn't realize how expensive it was. It's a thin volume, as many of them are, by Alan Lightman. The Transcendent Brain, and it's starting slowly, but it's very well done, as are the other books of his I've read, and it is supposed to be a look at spirituality through the lens of a materialist scientist. And we'll see where it goes. I'm enjoying it so far. It's got some neat history, some of which is familiar, and some of which is not at all. It's all of his stuff that I've read is very well done. It's interesting. He's a Caltech trained physicist who spends most of his time in the humanities, and I have a hard time not respecting someone who's a polymath. It's a neat book. I mean, I'm moving through it. I don't know if I'm moving through it kind of slowly, but it's neat.
Traditionally, these are the questions things we talk about off, just because sometimes they can bore people. But just out of curiosity, obviously, spirituality and science. Mm-hmm. Do you think it's written for someone who is in the sciences, or who do you?
I think it's written for anyone. I think that's that's a good question. I think that's one of his strengths as a writer. He writes, for him, science and other things, but for him it seems science is a deeply spiritual enterprise. And I gravitate to that because that's always been the case for me too. And so I think for anyone who wants kind of a deeper, more thoughtful read. I mean, he's just, he's positioning himself along the way. He's talking about these names in the past. kind of all over, and it's really it's accessible. It's really neat. It's very well written, and no, I mean, I don't think you need to have any specific background to read and enjoy something like this.
I bring it up because maybe at some point I can't right now. I've got
Too many things on your desk.
too many things to read, including some stuff that you've recommended over time.
Funny.
Amongst other things that I am well behind on working on, just because I've been
Life.
Yeah, and I've been, I've talked about it. I'm focusing on my job search.
Yeah.
And enjoying and truly trying to enjoy the time I have off.
Good for you.
Yeah, and be selective about it. So
yeah.
Okay.
All right. Well, you heard it here first, everyone. Whatever it is you heard. And on that note, we are thrilled that you were able to join us for our chat with Jaime Green, author of many things, most recently and most notably The Possibility of Life, Science, Imagination, and Our Quest for Kinship in the Cosmos. Jaime, thanks again for joining us. We'd love to have you back. And to all of you out there, as always, be well, stay well. We will chat with you next couple weeks.